here's well, I find this debate fascinating. In a year where there appeared to be a scenario where there would be no debate at all, a debate has sprung. And it is fascinating to me that people are on one side are as staunchly entrenched on their viewpoint as the other people on the other side. And I really find myself saying that I wouldn't be outraged by either. And the question is, if FSU beats Louisville in the ACC championship, whether it's by 3 or 20, might make a difference to you, maybe it doesn't. But if they win, they will have a 0 in the loss column. And to the question of, therefore, should they be in the college football playoff, again, the argument is such that I hear people passionately saying, hey, they got 0 losses, they're a Power 5, they're in, no matter what. And then the other people are like, no, there's language in the committee bylaws that says if the team is fundamentally changed, I'm paraphrasing now, which FSU obviously is without Jordan Travis, that the committee's job is to pick the 4 best teams, and FSU wouldn't be one of them. Where does Peter Fiutak land on this?
Knowing the college football playoff people, I used to work with them. I've been through the process. I've been through the grapevine thing and everything like this. The rules are set up to be loose, to be able to allow the committee to pick anybody they want. If they wanted to pick Louisiana, Monroe, Eastern Michigan, and whatever, they could do whatever they wanted. So their goal is to try to come up with the 4 best teams. I am, however, and this is the only area of my life that I am this way, a strict believer in precedent when it comes to how they have done this. And in the short history of this college football playoff, they have never kept out a 13-0 Power 5 conference champion. That, and they have never left out a 12-1 Power 5 conference champion except for once, and that's because we had a 12-0 Notre Dame instead of an Ohio State team that got boat raced by Purdue. So to me, it's not fair to say, okay, your quarterback got hurt and you can't overcome this. Obviously, Florida State's not necessarily as good as they were with Jordan Travis, but yes, 13-0, especially since there aren't other undefeated options potentially there on the table. A 13-0 Power 5 conference champion no matter what. There's no way they are not taking a 13-0 ACC champion Florida State.
He said there is no way, ladies and gentlemen, no way.
They're not. They can't.
Although I wouldn't be outraged, to use my word, for either outcome. I am leaning firmly on your side, which is why I said.
Well, here's the thing: who's your alternative? So in your scenario here, let's say. Here's how the only way this comes up is, let's say we have Chuck, and remember the thing about this is when you're talking about betting and in the history of the college football playoff era, the conference championships have been total chalk. We have yet to, the upsets have been something, Utah got USC last year, or, Baylor, got Oklahoma State. There's been really kind of mild upsets. We haven't had the, Iowa over Michigan. We haven't had the big giant, left hook from anywhere. So assume these conference championships go chalky. The one that would be the opposite, which actually would be an upset now, would be if, let's say, Washington goes 13-0. Let's say Georgia wins and goes 13-0, and let's say Michigan goes 13-0. So those 3, no one would question. Those 3 would be in without even a discussion. And then let's say Florida State goes 13-0. It's easy. There's no reason to tune in on Sunday morning. But let's say Washington loses. Let's say Alabama beats Georgia. That's going to be the one funkiest scenario on this, because it affects Texas and affects Oregon, is if Bama beats Georgia. Then the argument becomes 1-loss Georgia, because you're not supposed to know. In theory, you're supposed to wake up from a coma and pick these teams. You're not supposed to know that they're the 2-time national championship, but we know how this works. Mm-hmm. 2-time national champion Georgia in a conference, though, that's the worst of the Power 5 by a mile when it came to head-to-head competition with the rest of the Power 5s, but it's still Georgia. 12-1 Georgia, who loses to Alabama. Let's say it's a close loss, or 13-0 Florida State. There's your discussion that they would have. At the end of the day, they would put in Alabama, and then who do you leave out? So I think 13-0 Florida State's in no matter what. I still think that there's a possibility that the SEC would get left out, but it won't, because Alabama would get in if it beat Georgia.
Yeah, the other controversy beyond the FSU perhaps controversy is that Alabama thing. And, if Alabama somehow gets in over Texas, right, with both having one loss, that would just, that would be justifiable outrage, wouldn't it, Pete? At least get
they'd have to move the offices out of Grapevine, Texas. You couldn't operate there in Dallas and do that. But look, hold on, Pete. I know you love to talk, but let me just get in one thing. Even Pete Fiutak would admit, based on your Power 5 hierarchy snobbery, that would be ridiculous. Yes? Can't do it. You got to put Texas in.
All right.
And the justification would be from the College Football Playoff Committee that if Georgia is the number one seed, let's see what happens tonight. Michigan should be number one. The committee's been a little all over the place. But let's say Alabama, especially if Alabama, beats them badly, all of a sudden you're like, how do you keep Alabama out of the college football playoff? Well, what if Washington wins? And obviously, what if Michigan wins? What if Florida State wins? Who do you leave out, Texas or Alabama?
So what's the tell tonight? What are you looking for in these penultimate rankings? What's the tell?
Remember when we first did this, the first ever college football playoff rankings, Iowa State was third. They won, I think, 55-3 over Iowa State, and they finished sixth. So it all changes because of the whole calculus changes on the conference championships. Because, again, whatever it is tonight, if Bama beats Georgia, that throws everything into a tizzy from there. Yeah. So it really is just as crazy as, do you think, and here's where Bama beating Georgia really screws things up, because, let's say Oregon beats Washington. Now what do you do? Because I think if Texas beats Alabama, they have to say, we are going to put let's say Alabama wins and Texas beats Oklahoma State. They're going to say, we're going to put both of them in, because Alabama needs to be in because they beat the number one Georgia Bulldogs, and Texas has to be in because they beat them by 10. Oregon's out in this scenario. So
if FSU wins by a point and Bama, let's say, beat Georgia by 10, right? And Oregon beat Washington by 20 or whatever it is. Well, it'll be so fascinating to see.
I think I was on with you, actually. I don't know if we've been on for this long, but the first college football playoff.
Yes, I was going to bring this up. Yeah.
When it was supposed to be the four best teams, Florida State would, but there you only had I think two undefeated. I think maybe one, but Florida State had to be in because it was undefeated. But they were not one of the four best teams. They squeaked by. The ACC was bad.
They put them in as the number 3 team. They were the only undefeated, and they put them in as the 3rd seed. Jameis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that sort of set the precedent. Was like, if you're an undefeated Power 5 champion, I do think in any scenario, there's no chance a 13-0 Power 5 champion does not get let in, because they've always defaulted to undefeated, including Notre Dame, who 2020, we had this discussion, Texas A&M was better. Their only sin was they lost to Alabama, who turned out to be awesome. And they put in Notre Dame because they were undefeated and then got killed by Clemson. So they do like the undefeated aspect.
Pete, I actually agree with you. I do think they'll put in FSU no matter what. And I know there's some people who
think they will.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.